Hi everyone, this is Chapter 6, Existential Therapy for Counseling 4500. Alright, so this is probably going to be one of the most interesting when it comes to theories because it's a lot of philosophy that is the reason why this specific theory exists. So let's get into it, right? Alright, introduction. More of a way of thinking and attitude about psychotherapy. Yalom and Josselson is existential therapy is an attitude towards human suffering that has no manual. It asks deep questions about the nature of the human being and the nature of anxiety, despair, grief, loneliness, isolation, and anomie. Anomie is a lack of the usual social or ethical standards in an individual or a group. Okay, it also deals with essentially the question of meaning, creativity, and love. So I would say it's very emo. Okay, explores themes of mortality, which basically means death, meaning, freedom, responsibility, anxiety, and loneliness as it relates to the person's current struggle. All right, the goal in existential therapy is to assist clients in their exploration of the existential givens of life, how they are sometimes ignored or denied, how addressing them can ultimately lead to a deeper, more reflective, and meaningful experience. So, right here, what it's talking about is exploring what it means to be alive and is there a meaning to it? Is there a bigger picture? Is there a purpose that we are all living? Right? Because sometimes when we're really feeling really hopeless, we're like, what's the point of life? What's the meaning of life? Right? And that's very existential. All right, grounded in the assumption that we are all free and therefore responsible for our choices and actions. So, right there is, whatever you do in this life, whether it's healthy or not, it was a choice, right? And so, if you make those choices, do you accept responsibility for the consequences that follow, right? So, you want to think about those things. And it can be very scary because you're like, well, I didn't realize that I was making a choice when I did this, but I am, and we have to realize that. We are the authors of our lives and we design the pathways that we follow. So, again, very similar when it comes to, in terms of like Adlerian, which is that, we go forward, we're looking forward, we have goals in the future. And what do we do to get to those things? So it's going to be different than Freud. Remember, Freud was deterministic, right? Which is that things happen when you're younger and that's it. And now we're just analyzing how it has affected us in the way that we're living. We are not the victims of circumstance because we are what we choose to be. So there's a little hope there, right? Once a client understands how he, she, or they have passively accepted the circumstances and surrendered control, they can start to consciously shape their own lives. So once they go to therapy and existential therapy, they will realize, like, there are ways that they just give up, certain things or don't choose anything, which again, you're still making that decision. And then once you realize that, then you know that you can choose something different, then maybe your life will be better and hopefully healthier than it is the way it is now, which is the reason why you're coming to therapy, right? So the ultimate thing here is to accept responsibility. Now let's talk a little bit about the historical backgrounds in philosophy and existentialism. Not founded by any particular person or group, drawn from philosophies in Europe in the 1940s and 50s. Okay, so now we have to think about what happened in the 1940s and 50s, and probably a little bit before that in Europe. And that is the wars, the world wars, right? Especially, specifically, World War II. Okay, because that ended, I believe, in the late 30s. And so what has happened since then, right? And remember, a lot of people died. Remember, we had the Holocaust, amongst other things, right? And so it's a lot of trauma that had happened. So this is why people feel scared, lonely, sad. They feel like there's no purpose in life because so many people had died. And then, of course, this is now the time where we're going back and looking at those things in the 1940s and then, of course, the 1950s as well. So during this time period, we were devastated by war, or at least in the 1930s, struggled with existential issues of isolation, alienation, and meaningless. Remember, a lot of people started to move around the world as well during this time period to run away from, war and death and stuff. So about being alone in the world and the anxiety that comes along with it. Imagine having to get up and just leaving the country, the home that you have known your entire life, to go live somewhere else and basically start brand new. No money, most likely, right? No family, potentially. All these things. And everyone is feeling that all at the same time. So the philosophers that we're talking about when it comes to existential therapy is Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and then also Martin Buber. So now we're going to go through each of these. So Soren Kierkegaard is a Danish philosopher and Christian theologian. He talked a lot about angst, which is dread, that feeling of heaviness that we have, and anxiety and the uncertainty of life. Existential anxiety is making basic decisions about how we want to live. So that means what are these decisions that we need to make to live this life that we want, right? Is it really going to happen, even if we make these decisions? And the truth is, we don't know, right? But the healthy thing is, if it doesn't turn out the way we want it, is that we should then let's reevaluate everything, and then let's change it and see how we can make it maybe potentially happier. Anxiety is the school in which we are educated to be ourselves, or to be the self. Adolescents are awakened into real life by terrible uneasiness. Part of that is puberty, right? Like, we're trying to get to know who we are. Our hormones are starting to shift a little bit now. And so, yeah, we are starting to worry about what's going on. We also start to worry about the world. I think you probably heard a lot about climate issues when you were younger, and it makes you a little scared. Well, some of us anyways. Life has no guarantees except in death, because we all know that we all die. So that's not necessarily the most greatest feeling either, right? To know that we all die. Sickness unto death arises when we are not true to ourselves. So this is something that Kierkegaard is saying is, when you are not honest with yourself and living your honest life or authentic life, yeah, you're going to, potentially fall into a sickness in the mind or physically because you're not taking care of yourself. Becoming human is a project, and our task is not so much to discover who we are as to create who we are, or ourselves. Yeah, there we go. Next is Friedrich Nietzsche. He's a German philosopher. Revolutionary approach to the self, to ethics, and to society. Humans are not rational. So what he is already saying right there is that humans don't always make decisions that make sense. Sometimes we just choose to do things that we're like, why, right? So if that happens, then, we're going to probably end up making bad decisions. And this is what happens with some of us. We are creatures of will, then we are impersonal intellects. We give up our will to power when society convinces us to focus on worldly concerns. So we're almost like a sheep following a herd. So what that is saying is sometimes we're like, well, I don't know what the meaning of life is. I don't know what my purpose is. But you see all these other people doing these things. So you're like, I guess I might as well be doing the same thing because they're all doing something. It might make sense. So we're hoping that, when it comes to existential therapy, is that you are going to try and find out who you want to be, why you want to live, and then go from there. We become mediocre when we, follow everyone else, because we're like, oh, well, everyone else is doing it, so I guess we'll just do it too. So you haven't been authentic to who you are as a person, and then, you're just living life kind of meaninglessly, or with no purpose. Martin Heidegger. We exist in a world and should not try to think of ourselves as being apart from the world into which we are thrown. So what that is saying is, the world, we're one collective, right? And so if we try to think of ourselves outside of this, it might not necessarily make sense, because we function in a group of people, right? In the community that we live in, we have to have other people in our lives. So we have to understand that there's an interaction there. We fill our everyday life with superficial conversation and routines and waste our lives away because we often think that we can live forever. And that is quite true, right? Sometimes we, let's say, go to school, let's say go to high school, graduate, and then we just go to work, and make money and pay the bills. Are you living your life? Are you happy? Or are you kind of just like, this is it and this is what it is and that's it, right? That's what he is talking about when it comes to this part. So we live our lives like, hey, how are you doing? Everything's good. Yeah, we're fine. But Is there anything else deeper than that with your life? We hope that you are looking into it so that you can find those things. How we understand death lets us know whether we are living authentic or inauthentic lives. So if we all have a healthy relationship with death, we know that it's going to happen. And then hopefully from there, that will spark maybe a little fire underneath your butt so that you start to go live your life so that there's meaning and purpose in it. Awareness brings a more positive motivator to how we want to be. So that dread, let's say, that we were feeling before, we were scared or worried about, like, let's say, death or whatever, hopefully that will then make us become alive, right? And be aware. And then now we're going to choose to do things that will be meaningful to us. All right, Martin Buber. He is known for saying we live in a kind of betweenness. So this part right here is going to be a little potentially confusing. I'm just going to read it and then I'm going to try to interpret it for you, okay? So there are words that he uses, I, which is, and then there's thou, which is basically you. So I, you, or I, thou. And then I and it, right? IT. So what he is saying is that there's a separation with your communication with other people. You can either see other people as a thou or a you, or you can see other people as an it, or almost like a thing, okay? So now that I said that, hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. I'll read through it, and then we'll go through it again. Never just an I, but always an other. I changes when the other is an it or a thou. So the other is that other person that you're talking to or that you have a relationship with, right? So how you are, your relationship with other people, that betweenness changes depending on how you see other people. Do you see them as a thou or an it? When the I turns the other into an object, an it, we make the mistake of reducing another person into an object or a thing, okay? But when the I turns the other person into a thou, that means that we're seeing them as almost like an equal, okay? Here's an example. Hopefully this will also help you understand this. As you know, I come to school with a cup of coffee pretty much every day, right? So when I go to the coffee shop, let's say Starbucks, the person who's taking my order, I kind of treat as an it, okay? Because I really don't necessarily care who they are. I'm just there to go get my coffee. So my relationship with that person is an I, it, okay? However, let's say that I'm talking to my friend, my best friend. That person, I do care about who they are, right, as a person. So I'm going to see them as a thou, okay? So what Martin Buber was talking about is that our relationships do shift. We hope that you're going to start to treat people that you find important as a thou or a you, as opposed to an object or an it, okay? But here's the thing. We do this to everyone. When you go shopping at Walmart or Target or whatever, the cashier that you're working with or the person who's helping you find stuff, thank you for helping me or whatever, but that's it. You don't really care about that person, right? And so then that means that it's an I, it. And it's okay because those are people that are not in your life a lot, right? But the people who are in your life, you do want to treat them like a thou or another person. You want to show them value. So your clients, you want to see them as a thou. The problem is that sometimes people come to therapy because they've only been treated as an it, okay? And so they're looking for worth and value in themselves, and they don't realize sometimes that they do have that. It's just because the people around them have treated them like an object or an it, and that's it, okay? So that's what the I, thou, I, it relationship is. And we're hoping that you recognize those things. And then also just imagine, here's another example. When a musician or an actor wins an award, right? Sometimes you'll hear them say, I want to thank God for giving me this, right? That's treating God as almost like an it. Because you're like, thank you for giving me this award that I value, right? That's not what the purpose of God is for most people in religion, right? It's not about achieving material things. So then that becomes potentially an issue because some people are now devaluing let's say they're gods, if that's what they're interested in. Obviously there are people who don't believe in it, so we're not talking about that necessarily right now, but you understand what I'm saying, right? All right, so it's about being or having presence, which is being here in the now. It enables a true I thou relationship. We're hoping that you understand that now. It allows for meaning to exist in a situation, and then it enables an individual to be responsible in the here and now. So to be able to act responsibly when you're working with other people, communicating with other people, and the people that you do need to hopefully have a thou relationship, you will have that thou relationship. There is a link on this one, which is in the first line, that you can click and then you can watch. It's a really great explanation of all of this. Most likely we'll also watch this in class as well, so we can have a discussion. All right, now Jean-Paul Sartre. That is, humans are more free than earlier existentialists had believed. Our values are what we choose. Failure to acknowledge our freedom and choices results in emotional problems. Okay, so again, we know that we can do all these things, but do we do it? And if not, maybe we're not necessarily being the healthiest, right? Freedom is hard to face, so we make up excuses such as, I can't change now because of my past conditioning. So something happened in the past, so I can't change anything anymore, right? There's no way. But there really is a way. We are condemned to be free. Our actions means that we are choosing who we are being. Yeah, that's pretty deep, isn't it? All right, some key figures in contemporary existential psychotherapy. Viktor Frankl, probably one of the most famous. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. Rollo May, Irving Yalom, and then James Bugendahl. So let's go through each of these. Viktor Frankl, influenced by Freud, follower of Adler. So this is almost like third generation, right? And then he also knows Nietzsche. All right, he who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. So what that is saying is, if you have a purpose in life, then you'll know how to do it. You know how to live it, right? But you need to have a purpose in life, so you need to realize what it is. His famous thing was, that which does not kill me makes me stronger. And I know Kanye West, I believe, was canceled now. However, he had a song about that. Now that what don't kill me can only make me stronger. That's a reinterpretation of what this is, Viktor Frankl. So it's not something like Kanye West himself invented. It's a very famous quote. So I just want to let you know this is where it came from. Okay. All right. Another thing about Viktor Frankl is that he invented this thing called logotherapy, or the meaning of therapy through meaning, like finding a meaning in life. So what does it mean to be fully alive? Life has meaning under all circumstances. So whatever life that you're living, there is meaning to it. We're just hoping that you find out what it is, right? If you don't realize it. Central motivation of living is the will to meaning. We have the freedom to find meaning in all that we think. We must integrate body, mind, and spirit to be fully alive. So he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, because what happened was, during the Holocaust, he and his entire family were put into the concentration camps, and it is believed that he is the only member of his family that survived and made it out. So he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. The first half of the book is about his life while living in the Holocaust, where he saw a lot of people dying, giving up on life, and then dying, whereas other people did not. So he was really interested in, how is it that some people are able to survive this trauma, this really bad trauma, while others did not, right? So it's a really great book. I recommend everyone reading it. Right, the modern person has a means to live, but often has no meaning to live for. So you can live, but do you live your life? Right, that's what it's asking for. Challenge people to find meaning and purpose through suffering, work, and love. So we're going to experience all those things: suffering, pain, but we also go through work and also love. What does it all mean? What is the meaning behind all of that? That's what we're asking for, or at least that's what Viktor Frankl is asking for. Rollo May, it takes courage to be, and our choices determine the kind of person we become. There's a constant struggle within us because, we have to choose these things, and it causes anxiety. It causes us to feel weird. It causes us to feel gross about ourselves sometimes, or have that dread, all those weird feelings. And he's saying, but that's part of what it means to be a human who is alive, right? We want to be mature and be independent, but it is painful. That process is really painful. Dependence, insecurity, while there may be joys and pains when growing up. Okay, so again, that's what he's talking about there. Irving Yalom developed existential therapy to individual and group psychotherapy, isolation and relationships with other people. So what he did was, or he's known for, is these group therapy experiments. When he talked about living and then also death, like, sometimes for some of us, when we realize that we are going to die, let's say because we get a diagnosis of something like a disease that we're going to die, people tend to then go, oh no, I only have a couple months to live. Let me make those couple of months really meaningful in my life. What are the problems that I have been living with? What are the guilty things I feel? And I want to resolve it so that when I die, I will be at peace with myself. Okay. So, he talks about finding the meaninglessness of it and then also finding the meaning because of it as well. Believes that all psychotherapeutic frameworks can incorporate existential themes. So what he is saying is that all of the therapies that you're talking about right now, if you talk about the fact that we do have a limited time in the world, that it motivates us to then start to live our lives and find meaning in our lives. He is known for working with cancer patients who have now known that they have cancer and they only have a certain amount of time to live, and what they do to make sure that the remaining time of their lives that they're alive means something to either themselves and or their families and loved ones. James Bugenthal, existential humanistic psychotherapy, believed the primary task is to help clients make new discoveries about themselves in a living moment and not just talking about it. So what that is talking about is being a participant and not just a spectator. Participant is actually someone who's actually part of what's going on in life, right? As opposed to a spectator, which is someone who's watching from like the audience or from the bleachers or from at home. This is something that we worry about now because a lot of us just sit and watch Netflix and binge watch all that stuff and watch reality, which is like kind of like people living their lives. So you're not living your own life, but you're watching Kim Kardashian live her life, right? So that's not necessarily very healthy because how about your own life? Do you not value it? Do you not find meaning in it? No, you're just watching other people fight, have fun, and all that other stuff. And that's why it's so addicting, is because you're like, ooh, this is what people are doing. But then now you need to realize that you've become passive. Okay. Resistance to being fully present during therapy and in life. So we're going to notice and watch out for when a client doesn't want to talk about something. Sometimes they make excuses. It's kind of like those ego defense mechanisms in Freud. We might intellectualize these things, try to make it logical and reasons why we're not living our lives. Being argumentative. So you might fight with people like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? Or always seeking to please other people. So you're doing other people and living other people's lives as opposed to your own. Therapist points out all the resistance, which is what is known as tags in existential therapy, so that the client can see them and then break free. So once you realize that you're resisting or you have these tags in your life, then hopefully you can realize those things and then be free and then start participating in your own life. All right, this is the end of the first part of this chapter. Bye.